Hello, my friends. If you love these stories, show your support by liking and subscribing. I had always loved Christmas. There was something magical about the way the snow softened the edges of the world, how the streetlights glinted off frozen tree branches, and how the scent of cinnamon and pine seemed to curl into every corner of the house. This year, though, something felt off. I couldn't explain it. Just a gnawing unease I tried to ignore as I decorated my apartment. I lived alone in a small, old building downtown. It wasn't much, but it had charm. Creaky floorboards, a high ceiling, and a fireplace that actually worked. I'd spent the previous week stringing lights across the living room, setting up my modest tree in the corner, and wrapping presents for my family. I had promised myself that this year, I would finally feel the Christmas spirit in full. But the moment I plugged in the lights that evening, the apartment went cold. Not just a normal winter chill, this was the kind of cold that seeped into your bones, made your teeth chatter despite the radiator working overtime. I shivered, blaming the draft from the old windows, and reached for the blanket on the sofa. Then I heard it. A faint whisper, like someone standing just behind me, breathing my name. Emily. I froze. My name is Emily. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end. Hello? I called, trying to force my voice to sound calm. The apartment was empty. Of course it was, but the whisper came again, softer this time, almost like it was curling around me. Emily, open the door. I don't know why, but I obeyed. I went to the door, twisted the knob, and peered into the hallway. Empty. Just the dull flicker of the hallway light, the shadows stretching long across the walls. I laughed nervously. Okay, Emily, I said to myself. You're imagining things, Christmas nerves, that's all. I closed the door and turned back to my tree, but something caught my eye. One of the ornaments, a small glass angel, was rocking ever so slightly. There was no draft. I reached out, touched it, and it felt ice cold. Not the kind of cold from winter, but unnatural. The kind that made your fingertips sting and your stomach twist. I dropped it. It shattered on the floor. The sound was loud in the silence, and then, impossibly, I heard a second crash. From upstairs. I don't have an upstairs. My apartment was a one-story loft. My pulse kicked up, my chest tight. It's just the building settling, I whispered. Old building noises, that's all. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I tried to distract myself by finishing the tree decorations, but every time I hung an ornament, I could swear something moved out of the corner of my eye. Shadows that weren't there before, flickers in the lights. I kept telling myself it was fatigue. I was working long hours before Christmas, barely sleeping. It had to be that. By midnight, the apartment was silent, too silent. I sat on the sofa, wrapped in my blanket, trying to read a book, but the words swam on the page. That's when I heard the music. Soft, faint, coming from the living room. Silent Night. But not on any device I owned. The melody drifted around me, slow, off-key, dragging, like someone singing it under their breath just behind the walls. I didn't want to get up, but curiosity and terror mingled into a compulsion I couldn't resist. I followed the sound. The music grew louder, more distorted, until I reached the kitchen. And then I saw it. My refrigerator was open. I hadn't left it open. Inside, instead of food, there was a small wooden doll, carved crudely to look like me. Its eyes were hollow black pits, and its mouth was stretched in a permanent scream. Around its neck, a tiny string of lights flickered weakly. And then I felt it. A breath on my neck, cold and sharp, like the winter wind had invaded my apartment. I spun around, but nothing was there. I dropped the doll, and when it hit the floor, it rolled toward the living room. I backed away, heart hammering, and that's when I realized I was hearing footsteps, soft, dragging, like someone walking barefoot on the old floorboards. Emily, not a whisper this time, a voice, low, guttural, echoing. It didn't come from the walls or the ceiling or the hallway. It came from inside me. I ran to the door, flung it open and into the hallway. The building was empty, silent, perfectly normal. I could see the snow falling outside. Relief, like a sudden wave of warmth, flooded me, until I realized my apartment door was still open behind me, and in the doorway stood a figure. It was me, or something wearing my skin, my hair, my clothes, my eyes. But its face, oh God, its face. The mouth was twisted impossibly wide, and the eyes were empty black voids. It tilted its head, and I saw my own reflection in its eyes. My scream caught in my throat as it whispered, "Merry Christmas, Emily." I bolted into the night. Snow crunched under my feet. The streets were empty, the lights blurred in tears and panic. I didn't stop until I reached my parents' house 3 blocks away. I told them what happened. They tried to calm me down, but they didn't see it. They didn't hear it. And when I called my apartment building the next day, the superintendent told me something I could hardly believe. "My dear, there hasn't been anyone living in that loft for years. It's been empty since the fire." A fire. I remembered the news clipping now. A fire on Christmas Eve years ago. The tenant, a young woman, alone, died in the flames. And I realized with a sick twist in my stomach that the doll, the whispers, the footsteps, the thing wearing my face, it wasn't just visiting me, it was claiming me. When I returned to the building weeks later, against my better judgment, the apartment was empty. No doll, no sign of anyone. But I could still hear it at night, whispering my name, humming Silent Night softly, dragging its empty feet through the shadows. I've moved since then, far away. New city, new apartment. But every year when Christmas comes, I see it in the reflections. The hollow eyes in shop windows, the distorted shapes behind the frosted glass. And I know, in the deepest part of me, that one Christmas night, something went wrong, and it never truly let me go. Some nights when I close my eyes, I can hear it whispering, "Emily, open the door." And I know, if I ever do, I won't be coming back. I always thought my neighborhood was charming during the holidays. Every year, people would go all out. Lights, fake snow, decorations lining every roof, every tree, every mailbox. This year, I decided to do the same. I bought strings of lights, fake icicles, and even a small animatronic Santa. My apartment was small, but I wanted it to feel festive. I finished decorating late on Christmas Eve, exhausted but satisfied. The apartment glowed with red, green, and gold, shadows dancing along the walls. I sat down on the couch with a cup of cocoa, listening to Christmas music and feeling a rare sense of calm. That's when I noticed it. The lights weren't blinking the way I set them. They pulsed in a slow, uneven rhythm, like a heartbeat. I frowned, touched the plug, and unplugged the whole string. Nothing happened. The lights kept pulsing, even unplugged. A chill ran down my spine. I laughed nervously. Must be my imagination. I went to bed early, hoping sleep would clear my mind. I woke hours later to the sound of jingling, not the music from my speakers, real jingling, like tiny bells. My apartment was dark, the only light the soft glow from the Christmas tree. I froze. The sound came again, louder this time from the corner near the balcony door. I got up, heart hammering. "Who's there?" No answer, only the jingling. I edged closer, and that's when I saw them, shadows moving outside the balcony. Not ordinary shadows. They had shape, almost human, but impossibly thin and long, their movements jerky and unnatural. I stepped back, but one shadow seemed to detach itself and press against the glass. I yelped and slammed the door shut, locking it. My hands were shaking as I backed into the living room. I could hear it now, soft whispers like a crowd of people murmuring just beyond the walls. Some words I couldn't understand, others I could. Come, play, come. I tried to call my friends, my family, anyone, but my phone was dead. No signal, nothing. The jingling grew louder, now accompanied by footsteps, soft, deliberate, circling the apartment. I could feel the air grow colder, my breath fogging in front of me. Then, the lights on the tree flickered, and I realized something horrifying. The ornaments weren't reflecting my apartment anymore. They were reflecting something else. I leaned closer, squinting. I saw a room I didn't recognize, filled with figures, children all staring at me, their faces pale and distorted, their mouths frozen in silent screams. I stumbled back. The jingling became a cacophony. The shadows at the balcony pressed harder against the glass, moving in rhythm with the lights on the tree. My chest tightened. I understood, somewhere deep in my mind, these things wanted me. I ran to the kitchen, looking for anything I could use to defend myself. A knife, a heavy pan, something. But when I turned back, the living room was different. The tree had grown taller, stretching up impossibly toward the ceiling. The ornaments had multiplied, hundreds of them, all reflecting the same room with the screaming children. I realized then, they weren't ornaments. They were windows, glimpses into their world. A loud crash came from the balcony. The door shook violently. The shadows had found a way in. I grabbed the pan and swung it at the glass, but my arm went straight through, like it wasn't even there. I screamed. I ran to the bedroom and locked the door. I could hear them now. Whispers, footsteps, laughter that didn't sound human. I pressed my back against the door, tears streaming down my face, and then I heard it. A voice, soft and almost sweet. "Don't hide. We just want to play." I realized then that I had made a mistake. The decorations, the lights, the animatronic Santa. Something in all of it had called them. Maybe I had invited them in without realizing. Maybe Christmas, with its lights and music, wasn't supposed to be cheerful. It was a signal. Hours passed. Time lost meaning. I heard the scratching on the walls, the whispers in the corners, the jingling of tiny bells that grew louder and louder. My phone remained dead. I tried to scream, but my voice was swallowed by the apartment. By morning, the neighbors noticed the lights. I was gone, just vanished. My apartment stood empty except for the Christmas tree. And the lights, they were still pulsing like a heartbeat, waiting. Weeks later, someone else moved in, a young woman, excited about her first Christmas in the city. She hung her lights, set up her tree. That night, she woke to jingling, to shadows pressing against the balcony. She heard whispers, soft at first. "Come, play, come," and somewhere in the back of her mind, she knew that the Christmas lights had chosen her. No one in the building ever questioned the strange disappearances. The lights, they said, were beautiful, magical even. But those who truly understood knew better. Christmas wasn't just a holiday. It was a calling. And the shadows, they were always waiting for the next invitation. I had never liked Christmas much. The lights, the music, the forced cheer, it all felt hollow. But this year was supposed to be different. My little niece, Sophie, was coming to stay with me, and I wanted to make it special. I bought a tree, hung ornaments, and baked cookies in a small attempt at normalcy. Everything was perfect until the morning of December 24th. I woke to the smell of smoke. At first, I thought it was the neighbor burning toast or perhaps a fireplace from somewhere down the hall. But then I realized the smoke was inside my apartment. My heart raced as I jumped out of bed. The living room was filled with a thin gray haze. The tree, my perfect tree, was fine, but the small gift pile underneath was smoking. I rushed over. One of the presents, the smallest one, was smoldering despite being wrapped in paper. My fingers trembled as I touched it. The wrapping paper hissed and crumpled, and I jumped back. The gift box fell open on its own, spilling something dark and wet onto the carpet. It was a small wooden figure, roughly carved, a man kneeling with his head bowed. At first, I thought it was an old toy, but then I noticed its eyes, tiny black holes that seemed to burn into my vision. I tried to throw it away, but it wouldn't move. No matter how hard I pushed her through, it always landed upright, staring at me. That night, Sophie arrived. She was bright, cheerful, and completely oblivious to the strange feeling that had settled over the apartment. I told her the story of the gift, but laughed it off as a weird accident. She wasn't scared. In fact, she seemed fascinated. She picked up the wooden figure and named it Mr. Neely. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing shadows flicker across the walls, and faint scratching noises came from the corners of the room. Sophie slept soundly, hugging Mr. Neely. I told myself I was imagining things. At 2 a.m., I woke to laughter, soft, high-pitched, and wrong. Sophie's room was dark, but the door was slightly ajar. I got up to check and froze. Mr. Neely was no longer on the floor beside her bed. He was on the windowsill, outside the glass, staring in at me with those hollow eyes. I blinked. One moment he was inside. The next, he was outside. My chest tightened. Then came the whisper. "Give me the last gift." The voice was like nails scraping across ice. I spun toward Sophie's room. She was awake, eyes wide, pointing at the corner. Mr. Neely had multiplied. Small figures, identical, littered every surface, shelves, the floor, the windowsill, all kneeling, all staring, all whispering. "Give me the last gift." I stumbled back. "Sophie, go to sleep. Don't touch them." She shook her head, her tiny face pale but defiant. "He said he wants it, Uncle. The last gift." "The last gift? What last gift?" I asked, panic rising. Sophie whispered, "The one you didn't wrap yet." I froze. I hadn't wrapped the present I had bought for her, the big one, the one she'd been asking about for weeks. I had hidden it in the closet. I realized with a sick twist in my stomach that the wooden figures were demanding it. I ran to the closet and yanked it open. Inside, the box glowed faintly, an unnatural warmth radiating from it. I grabbed it, and the figures trembled, rocking in place as if impatient. I wrapped it hastily, hands shaking. The figures remained still for a moment, then a soft sigh, almost human, escaped from them. I placed the gift under the tree. The whispers stopped. The shadows receded. The apartment was still again. I collapsed on the couch, exhausted, thinking it was over. Sophie slept, hugging her new gift, innocent and unaware of the terror that had just passed. But Christmas morning brought something far worse. Sophie ran to the tree, eager to open presents. I poured coffee, watching her joyfully. That's when I noticed the box I had wrapped for her had changed. The wrapping paper was no longer plain red. It was a deep, shifting black. Symbols, unfamiliar and twisting, were etched across the surface, moving as if alive. Before I could react, Sophie tore the paper. The box sprang open. A small figure leapt out, but it wasn't Mr. Neely. It was bigger, taller than any human I'd ever seen. It had the same kneeling posture, black, hollow eyes, and a crooked, impossibly wide grin. It looked around the room, taking in the lights, the tree, Sophie, and me. The wooden figures that had been kneeling all around the apartment now scuttled to life, moving like a swarm of insects, climbing over furniture, climbing up walls. The tall figure whispered something, its voice deep, resonant, and full of menace. "Thank you for giving me life." Sophie's eyes widened. She reached for the figure, but it stopped her with a long, clawed hand, not harming her, just holding her in place. The swarm of wooden figures surrounded us, moving in a perfect rhythm, their tiny mouths opening and closing in unison. Give the last gift. I realized too late what they meant. I had given them the gift, the only thing capable of calling them into this world. The presents, the lights, the decorations, they weren't just holiday cheer. They were a ritual, one that had been repeating for centuries, hidden in the traditions of Christmas. And I had completed it. I tried to grab the figure, throw it, destroy it, but the swarm pushed me down. My screams were muffled by the collective whispering. Sophie, terrified but defiant, clutched the figure. The tall figure leaned over her. "Your last gift," it whispered, "is yours to keep." And then, the world tilted. The apartment melted around me. The walls turned to black wood. The floor became a twisted forest of toys and figures, all kneeling, all watching, all waiting. I realized with a frozen horror that I wasn't in my apartment anymore. I wasn't even in the real world. I was inside their realm, trapped, kneeling, waiting for the next unwitting human to give the last gift. I woke up hours later, or maybe days. Time no longer made sense. Outside my window, the snow was falling, the lights twinkled, and the neighborhood looked perfectly normal. But I wasn't. I was one of them now, a figure, kneeling, hollow-eyed, whispering to the next victim who dared bring Christmas into their home. And as the first knock came at the door that night, I knew the cycle would never end. Give the last gift. I had always loved the quiet of Christmas Eve in the city. The streets were empty, the snow softened every sound, and the lights reflected on the ice in a way that made everything look dreamlike. This year, I decided to spend Christmas alone in my apartment. Work had been exhausting, my friends were traveling, and I had no family nearby. I told myself it would be peaceful. Around 7 p.m., I finished decorating my apartment. My small tree sat in the corner, glowing softly with warm white lights. I'd baked cookies, poured myself a cup of cocoa, and settled onto the couch with a blanket. I turned on the radio, classic Christmas carols, and for a while, everything was perfect. Then, I heard it. A voice, soft and melodic, singing outside my window. Not the radio, not someone shouting. It was right outside, and it sounded like it came from just a few feet away. I froze, listening. The song was familiar. "O come, all ye faithful." But there was something wrong about it. The words were off, stretched, slow, almost guttural. I looked out the window. Nothing. Just the snow falling, the street lights flickering. I laughed nervously. Probably a neighbor, carolers, or my imagination, I muttered. I went back to the couch. The voice returned, louder now, closer, and somehow coming from everywhere at once. It didn't make sense. My apartment faced the street and no one could have been outside without me noticing. I stood approaching the window carefully. And then I saw him. A man, or at least what appeared to be a man, was kneeling in the snow. His face was pale, almost translucent, with deep hollow eyes that glinted in the light from the street lamp. His mouth moved in perfect harmony with the song, but the melody was distorted, dragging the words like he was trying to stretch the sound itself. I stepped back. "Who? What are you?" I whispered. The man's eyes locked onto mine. The song stopped abruptly. Silence. Then, he tilted his head and smiled. A smile that didn't feel human. It was too wide, too sharp, too knowing. I backed away from the window, heart hammering. Then, the whisper came, almost under my breath, from inside the apartment. "Let me in." I spun around. No one was there. The room was empty. Only the glow from the tree lights cast long shadows on the walls. I told myself I was imagining it. Maybe exhaustion, maybe loneliness, maybe too much Christmas. But the knocking started next. Soft at first, rhythmic, almost musical. I approached the door cautiously. "Hello," I called. No answer. The knocking continued, and then, unmistakably, the voice. "Let me in." I shook my head, backing away. "No, go away." The air in the apartment grew colder. My breath fogged in front of me. I could see my own heart pounding in my chest. And then, the lights flickered. The Christmas tree, which had been warm and comforting, now cast shadows that seemed alive. Shapes moved in the corners of my eyes, darker than darkness itself, whispering just out of hearing range. I ran to the bedroom, locked the door, and tried to calm myself. Maybe if I just waited it out, it would stop. But I could hear the song again, softly through the walls. That voice, just a hum at first, grew louder, more insistent. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him, kneeling outside the window, watching me, smiling. And now, there was more than one. I saw dozens of shadows gathering on the street below, all swaying in rhythm with the distorted Christmas carol. Their faces were all the same, pale and hollow, smiling as if they had been waiting for me. I wanted to leave. I wanted to escape. But the door wouldn't open, not physically, not mentally. It was as if something had taken control of the apartment, anchoring me inside. The shadows pressed against the glass now, moving up the windows, spreading across the walls. The temperature dropped further, and I could feel the frost creeping along the edges of the floor. Then, the tallest figure appeared at the window. He didn't move like a human. His limbs were too long, his posture unnatural. And in his hands, he held a small gift, a wrapped box, simple, elegant, with a red ribbon. The whispering voice echoed in my mind. "Give me the gift." I shook my head. "I don't have a gift. I don't have anything," I screamed. But the figure tapped the window with the box, softly at first, then harder. The sound was like knuckles rapping on bone. And now I understood. The box was mine. Or rather, I had something to give without realizing it. My attention, my fear, my soul. Something intangible, something precious. The shadows pressed harder against the glass. The figures multiplied. Hundreds of them now, surrounding the apartment, climbing the walls, their hollow eyes fixed on me. I ran through the apartment trying to hide, trying to find a weapon, anything. But the gift, the box, it appeared in my hands. I hadn't touched it. Somehow, it had been placed there. A voice, different now, deeper, resonant, not human, echoed through the room. "Give it, or join us." I dropped the box. It slid across the floor toward the window. The figures pressed closer, moving impossibly fast. The tallest one leaned down through the glass, which somehow melted around him, allowing his grotesque form to pass inside. I screamed, stumbling backward, my vision blurred. The shadows enveloped me, and I could feel something cold, sharp, probing at my mind. The world tilted. The carols grew louder, grotesque, horrifying, a symphony of the damned. Then, silence. I woke on the couch the next morning. Sunlight streamed through the window. The apartment looked normal. The tree, the decorations, even the gifts. Everything seemed fine. The snow outside was pristine. No footprints, no shadows, no figures. I laughed nervously, shaking my head. Just a nightmare, I told myself. Just stress, just imagination, just Christmas. But as I reached for the radio to play some soft music, I noticed the small gift box on the windowsill. I hadn't put it there. And inside, there was a note written in a script that wasn't mine. Next year, I'll sing louder. The apartment door creaked behind me. I spun around. Nothing. The lights flickered, and through the window, I thought I saw a shadow kneeling in the snow, waiting, watching, smiling. I had never been one to celebrate Christmas much. The lights, the carols, the relentless cheer. It always felt like noise to me. But this year was different. My sister had insisted I host Christmas Eve at my apartment, and my niece, Lily, had been counting down the days for weeks. I relented, telling myself that it would be nice to do something for her, even if I didn't feel it myself. I spent the day decorating the apartment. A small tree in the corner, a few strands of twinkling lights, some garlands along the walls. Lily had brought a small snowman figurine, a ridiculous thing, plastic and smiling, with a carrot nose painted crookedly and a tiny scarf around its neck. I set it on the windowsill. By the time night fell, the apartment looked festive, warm. Lily had gone to bed early after too much excitement and too many cookies, and I sat alone with a cup of cocoa, enjoying the quiet. That's when I noticed something strange. The snowman. It wasn't on the windowsill anymore. I could have sworn I placed it there. Now it was on the floor, in the middle of the living room. I froze. My heart thumped. Maybe Lily had gotten out of bed. But I remembered checking her room. She was asleep. I bent down and picked it up. The snowman looked the same as before, except its painted eyes seemed a little darker. I shook my head. "Get a grip," I muttered. I went back to my cocoa, but then I heard it, a soft tapping at the window. Snow was falling outside, thick and muffling, so at first I thought it was just ice sliding down the glass. Then I heard a faint, hollow giggle. I froze. "Hello?" I called, my voice trembling. No answer, just the sound of wind faint against the glass. I shook it off and went to bed, locking the windows and doors. But I could not sleep. Something felt wrong. The apartment was too quiet, the shadows too dark. Around midnight, I woke to a scratching sound, soft like fingernails on wood. It was coming from the living room. I grabbed the nearest object, a heavy flashlight, and crept down the hall. The snowman was gone. I spun around looking for it. Then I noticed something impossible. Footprints in the dusting of snow that had gathered strangely on the living room floor, leading from the window toward the hallway. But the snow outside was untouched. My pulse pounded. "This isn't real. This can't be real," I whispered. Then I heard a voice, low, thin, and chilling. "Emily." I jerked my head toward the living room. The snowman, no, not the snowman, was standing there. Not the small figurine, but a full-sized version made of snow. Its coal-black eyes glinted in the dim light, the crooked carrot nose pointing at me. And its smile, wide, impossibly wide, like it knew something I didn't. I backed away, heart hammering. The snowman raised one stick-like arm and pointed toward the hallway. "Come, play." I ran toward the kitchen, looking for anything I could use to defend myself. Pots, knives, fire, I didn't care. I grabbed a skillet and swung. The snowman didn't even flinch. Its form shivered, then moved toward me with a speed no snowman should have. I tripped over the rug, hitting the floor hard. Pain shot through my side. I looked up. The snowman was closer now, its grin stretching wider, dark hollows where its eyes should be drilling into my mind. And then I realized it wasn't alone. Outside the window, dozens of snowmen were forming. Tiny at first, then growing, rising from the fresh snow outside. Their coal eyes glittered in the dim streetlights, their smiles wide, all facing me, waiting. I scrambled to my feet and ran for the front door. It wouldn't open. Not with force, not with shaking, not with pleading. The snowmen at the windows began tapping, knocking, scraping their frozen hands against the glass. A low, hollow chorus of whispers filled the apartment. Give us the gift. I realized then what I had forgotten. The gift Lily had been waiting for. The one I had meant to wrap tonight but had set aside in the closet because I was too tired. I'd been so careless, thinking Christmas was just decoration and cookies. But this was something else. I ran to the closet, yanking open the box. Inside, the small wooden train Lily had wanted, painted bright red and green. I clutched it to my chest. The tapping stopped. The whispers paused. The tallest snowman in the living room tilted its head, watching me. I ran back to the living room, holding the train high. The snowman advanced slowly. I held out the gift, voice shaking. Here, take it. Just leave us alone. The snowman paused. Its grin widened, impossibly, and then it took the gift. The wooden train disappeared into its icy chest as if swallowed by magic. The snowman shivered, its body cracking slightly, then melted into a puddle of slush on the floor. Outside, the other snowmen dissolved into the night, leaving only the pristine snow behind. I sank to the floor, trembling, covered in sweat and cold, staring at the empty space where the snowmen had been. I stayed awake the rest of the night, clutching Lily's train, waiting for another whisper, another tapping, another snowman. Nothing came. Christmas morning, Lily woke up full of energy. She ran to the living room, saw her train, and smiled. "Thank you, Uncle," she said, hugging me. I forced a weak smile. I wanted to tell her what had happened. I wanted to warn her. But how could I? Who would believe me? Snowmen coming to life, whispering for gifts, dragging you toward I didn't even know what. So I didn't tell her. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept looking out the window, staring at the snow-covered street, and then, far away, I thought I saw them. Small shadows, kneeling, grinning. Not human, not entirely snow. Waiting. Watching. I never leave gifts unwrapped again. I never underestimate Christmas, because somewhere in the cold, white night, they wait for the next mistake. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe for more.